Hey random people, RandomAttack here with another video talking about Gwent. Now in this one we're gonna be looking at my crafting guide to silvers and golds. So I'm gonna go through each faction and also the neutral pool, and I'm gonna give you a few suggestions on what to craft for each faction. Now before we get into this is kind of like a part 2 because I did a very short crafting guide with a few budget decks. I'm also gonna update those budget decks into a version 3, so the budget decks are each faction starter deck plus added cards, and I'm gonna add a few cards from what I've suggested and make them even better, so that's gonna be in the description below if you wanna check that out. Now before I get into any of the crafting stuff for each faction and also neutral pool, I wanna quickly mention that each faction has a mage and a spy, and they are silver cards, and I would recommend you craft them if you're finding yourself in a certain situation that you lose to too much. So for instance, gold weather is very prevalent right now and a lot of people are running it, so silver mages started popping out, and it's because they have the option of clear skies or 2 other spells. So in that mode's instance, so that's Northern Realms card, you can play Owl's Thunder, and Owl's Thunder is very good as well. So you have 2 options, and it's an Owl's Thunder or Clear Skies on a stick. So it's a very good card. Now each faction, like I said, has these. So Grimmest is the one for Skellige, and again, very good. You can use the Roar on one of your 1 strength cards, like a Priestess of Freya, and get 10 points out of that. Or you can use him for Clear Skies if your opponent has gold weather or just any weather you want to counter. Because Dagon's out there as well, Clear Skies is actually a good card, but you don't want to just be running Clear Skies. You want to have the option of other stuff, and silver mages give you that option. Now, like I said, if you're losing a lot to that, probably consider crafting one of those cards. Now the spies are cards that are over 11 strength, and they draw you a card. Now but they're disloyal, so you may be thinking, why would I want to give my opponent 11 points or 12 points and get a card? Well, it's because you get the card advantage, and card advantage is very big right now. If you have more cards than your opponent, you usually win because you have the last say and he can't react to your cards. And also now with the prevalence of Hailstorm, the spies are technically half strength, because you're usually gonna know which row you want to play Marigold's Hailstorm on, and you can play a spy on that row, and basically from 12 it's gonna go on to 6. So for 6 power to your opponent, you've basically got another card, and that's very big. It can win you games if you go second, and just having the spy and your opponent not having the spy means that you're gonna be 2 cards up the whole time. So you can use one of those cards to win round 1, and you can use one of those cards to then win round 3 as well. So you always have 1 card above your opponent, so you can always play something without them having the reaction to it. Now again, if you find yourself losing a lot because you don't have the last say, because your opponent says, well, now I have 2 cards in hand, you have nothing, I'm gonna play these, you can't react, so I'm gonna win. So they always keep their win conditions for the last play. If you can react to it, then it's a whole different situation, because you can keep your win condition, and maybe your win condition negates their win condition. So after we got that out of the way, let's move into the neutral pool, and this section is kind of gonna overlap with my previous video, because I suggested a few neutrals you should craft because they belong in every deck, and some of them are gonna pop up on this list again, so let's get into it. So the first few cards I'm gonna go over very quickly because I've already explained about them in my previous video, so if you want to check that out, then just go onto the video with a link in the description. So the first one is Hailstorm. Definitely recommend crafting this because you can put this in every single deck because it's from the neutral section, and it does a lot for you. You can target anything now, and this is great against throw stacking, this is great against high power units. It's just an amazing card. The next one is Roach. Roach again can fit in every deck, so when you're just starting out and you want to be building decks and you want to be experimenting with a lot of stuff, Roach is a good way to get your consistency, because some of the experimentation decks are not going to have a lot of draw, and this guarantees you get more consistency, and it also gives you a bit of tempo. So the next card I probably recommend you craft, and it's the first one after the, let's say, you can include every single deck. So this is more of a situational, I want to play this because I want something out of it, and that's Dorogari. So this guy can summon, this guy can summon 4 different units. So he has access to 4 different beasts, call them. So you have a Drowner, which is amazing. Right now it can negate some strategies like Skellige, self-wounding, and it can also put stuff in weather. So if you're playing, let's say you're playing Frost Northern Realms deck, right? And you don't actually have a lot of ways to interact with the other side, this is a good way of moving something. And it can also just give you an extra Drowner when you're playing monsters. So this card is very good in monsters as well, because you already have the weather, you have Frost and Fog. So you can use Necrophage to you can use Drowners to pull units onto a row. And you can also combine this with Hailstorm, so you can play this card almost in every deck really, because of the Drowner that can take a high power unit, put it onto a row, and then you can then Marigold's Hailstorm that row. Ekimara is a good way of basically doing a dry pass in the round that you're playing. So you're saying, I'm probably gonna pass after this because I'm getting the resilience for the next round. So this guy is gonna go to 6 power the round that it goes into play. And Wyvern, so that's a weird card, because sometimes you can actually use this card and do 3 damage, and it can be good, but you will usually be playing Drowner or Ekimara. And sometimes you're gonna have a feel that your opponent is gonna be playing a longer round. So you're gonna say, oh, my opponent actually wants to play a long round 1, and try and bleed me out of my cards, but he's gonna play a lot of units. So at that point, you may actually consider playing a Savage Bear. Now, Savage Bear is not great right now. Skellige decks are not running it, but sometimes it's a good option from Dorogari. So this card is, like I said, 4 cards on a stick. You get the choice. He's kind of like the neutral mage, so he doesn't spawn Clear Skies because that would be broken. So he just spawns you different cards that you can use in different situations. So that little mini game and that little option gives you cards that you maybe not have access to, because 3 of these cards are Monsters cards. If you are playing Northern Realms, then you have 3 Monsters cards basically you can choose from in your deck or in your hand when you have this guy in your hand. So that's one of the cards. Now another card I would suggest is Marching Orders. Now this one is probably gonna be lower on your list of crafting stuff, but most of the times you're gonna be playing low cost units in your deck that have a powerful deployability. So take for instance Stennis. If you only have Stennis in your deck, who is 3 power, this card always guarantees you're gonna draw him. And even if you don't, then you maybe have other lower power units in your in your deck that you may want to pull with this. So a good example is a River Scout. So this card guarantees you're gonna have a River Scout. So a River Scout is very important in your deck, but you also have Stennis, but you also have other cards you may want to pull. This card is a good way of guaranteeing that you're most likely gonna have it in your hand, because you're either gonna have the River Scout or you're gonna have this to pull the River Scout out. So it kind of fits the purpose of a good card that draws you a card that has a powerful deployability. Maybe it's not powerful in itself, but that's why this boosts it by 2. So this is one of the cards you should be thinking of playing when you actually have a better feel for the game and deck building and more options in your deck. Another very good card, which I've actually not needed because it's again a bit situational. So if you find yourself losing to, like I touched on it before, you're losing to spies and you actually don't have a spy, but you want to be playing different factions, you can't play Summoning Circle, which means that every time that your opponent plays a unit or you play a unit, you can then copy it. So that means if they play their spy, you can say, haha, I have Summoning Circle, I'm gonna play your spy on your row. So basically you negate the card advantage he would then have gotten from playing their spy. And again, playing this and then playing your spy is also a viable strategy, because sometimes you can get a powerful silver card that works well in your deck from your opponent. Sometimes you can get a powerful bronze card that just has a good effect that maybe counters their opponent because they've played a card that counters itself, if you know what I mean. And most of the time you're gonna be using it on a spy. So that's kind of like my neutral section. I'm gonna give an honorable mention to the Witchers, just because, again, if you like to have fun, maybe you want to craft them, but the thing is you have to craft all three of them, so that's a lot of scraps you're wasting. And this card, which I mentioned before in my previous tutorial, I still think this card is very good, and you should start crafting it if you're looking for an all-around good card that you can fit in any deck. But these cards are more the ones I mentioned, like Summoning Circle, Marching Orders, and Dorogari. Then, you know, you have more option there, so depending on what you want to do or what you want to play or what you're losing to, you can craft one of these cards. So let's move on to monsters. So I'm gonna give a honorable mention to the Crones before we start any of this. They are the cards I actually crafted first for monsters, and they were performing very well because they provide you with 2 deck thinning. If you have 2 of them in your deck, then you can pull the rest of them, and it's 20 power point play. But now that bronzes can do 18 power in 1 card, it's not that great, and they've fallen out of favor. Now they're still good, but sometimes you break your hand with them, and I've definitely played a lot with Crones. I would not recommend you craft them at the current stage, but they're always been a good card, and I feel like they're gonna pop into popularity sometime soon again. But they're not the first card I would probably recommend you craft, again, because you have to craft 3 of them. They're kind of like the Witchers. They're more powerful Witchers, but at the same time, they're not very, very good right now. Now, cards that are very, very good right now, and ones I'm gonna recommend you craft, are Morwood and the Toad Prince. So I'm gonna go through them and explain a bit why I think you should craft them. Now, Morwood is a lock, but he's probably one of the most powerful lock silver cards because it halves the power of a unit. Now, there are cards like Margarita that reset a unit and lock it, and sometimes that could be better, but in most situations Morwood's always gonna give you some kind of power because it doesn't require for the enemy to be boosted, it just halves its power. And it's also ignoring armor, so it's a very good effect after the lock. Now sometimes you'll be using this unit for the lock, and it is tied to the melee roll, so that maybe, you know, it's not agile, so it's not perfect. But because of the extra effect of damaging a unit by half of its power, it's very powerful against, let's say, Dolbatana Cavalry that is buffed to 18 power. So you play this and you basically do 9 damage with it and lock it. Now the lock doesn't matter, but the power difference can definitely matter sometime, because you can keep this for a last play and your opponent thinks, oh, what card is gonna do, you know, let's say 15 power. Well, Morwood's gonna do 15 power if you have something that's boosted to infinity. Works very well against Axemen as well, that are boosted, and you don't want to lock before, but then you're thinking, oh, at this situation I actually kind of want to lock it. Now, Toad Prince used to be good, but I think now that most of the silvers for monsters are not amazing, he's actually great, because sometimes you don't want to be using a card, or a card's falling out of favor in the matchup, or you have maybe a tech card in your hand that you're saying, well, I'm not against the deck that I'm taking against, so I don't want this card. And Toad Prince provides you with a consume, which can buff up your neckers if you're playing a necker version of a monster's deck, and it also boosts itself by the thing you've consumed, so you're not losing it. So you can't be using it in conjunction with Olgierd. That's a very good play, because you don't lose much power of the Olgierd, you only use 5 power, because in the next round he's gonna resurrect with 4 power. So you are getting carryover, you're getting a card draw out of it, so you're consuming a card and you're drawing something. And the good thing about this is you draw the card first, so you can draw something and then you're saying, oh, the thing I've drawn is actually not the thing I wanted, so I'm gonna consume that and keep my tech card in case my opponent's playing something that I want to kill. Sometimes you may be using it just for the raw power because you're thinking I'm never gonna use my spy, and you can consume your spy, and that's, you know, a lot of power in one card. So that's 17 points just in one card, and that draws you a card as well. So it's kind of like a semi-spy, if you know what I mean. It's not really a spy, but if it provides you with 17 power for you, then your opponent's most likely not going to do 17 power in one card, so you kind of have like a little bit of card advantage there. Now, these are the cards I'm going to recommend you go for after you've crafted, I would say, the necessary Frightener. Frightener is probably the best silver spy right now because of the movement effect. I think this card should probably not move to a row, and it should move from a row, but anyways, the current implementation is very good with something like Hailstorm, so you can pull something that's very big on a row that you're already gonna Hailstorm, so you put the Frightener there and you draw a card, and basically your Frightener is 6 points because of the Hailstorm, and you also probably do a lot more damage because you hit something that's very big. So this is my crafting section for monsters. There's not a lot to say here. Most of their silvers are not amazing right now. They fit in certain archetypes. If you're playing Consume, you probably want to craft Katkan. I don't have to explain why this is good. This is just kills some strategies, and most strategies is just, you know, a card that's going to provide you with raw power. It's almost always going to be above 12 power in a silver with a Consume, which buffs your neckers, so you can say 15. Let's move into Nilfgaard. So let's have a look at it, and there are a few things that I have to mention before we start. There are two major game plans that Nilfgaard are employing right now, so they're Reveal and Spice. Spice is much better, so I'm gonna recommend you craft the Spice cards first, but if you are playing Reveal, then I'm also gonna give you a card for that. I'm actually gonna give you two cards, but I'll give you some options for if you want to play Reveal. I would recommend you don't play Reveal because it just doesn't have the raw power right now. There are better decks out there, but maybe you're a fan. So let's get into it. So for Spice, the first card I'm gonna recommend you craft is Skellige, because he's, again, I would say a silver mage. So it's not really a silver mage, right? But it gives you the option of doing any spy from the core spice, I would say, in Nilfgaard. So you can do an ambassador, which is just straight up, you know, points, and it can buff up and enable your spice energy. And sometimes you just need the raw points, but most of the times you're going to be using it for an assassin or an emissary. So emissaries are good for cycling your deck, but sometimes you just draw one emissary and then you break it, aka you don't draw another emissary from it, and this card can just give you the extra draw. So, and sometimes you just draw an Imperial Brigade for extra power from this card, and he's just crazy. Other times you may be thinking, my opponent has something that I actually want to kill, I don't have an assassin in hand, I don't have a way of dealing with it, but I have like a few emissaries which I can draw stuff, but that card needs to die now. That card needs to die now, and I can't afford it not, so I'm gonna play an assassin on it. So after saying that, I'm pretty sure you can understand that if you're playing Spies, this is a card to definitely have in your deck. It's going to provide you with a lot of utility and an extra emissary or an assassin whenever you need it, and sometimes ambassador. The next card is your win condition as Nilfgaard, and if you've not figured it this far, then I think you've not played against enough Nilfgaard, but it's Joachim the Wett. So this card is ridiculous in conjunction with one of the gold cards that I'm going to recommend you craft, but on its own even, it guarantees one of your loyal cards is going to get pulled from your deck and boosted by 10, so if you only have one of them, which is the one that kills a spy, well, deals 7 damage to a spy, but basically kills Joachim, then he's gonna boost himself to, I think it's 19 power, because he is 5, and then whenever he kills something, he strengthens himself by 4. So it's a great card. So you play this, it pulls out the card that kills this card, so you're not giving really anything to your opponent, but you're gaining a lot of power from it. And sometimes you can use a sire to put, after you've emptied your deck with all the cycling you have, you can put Joachim and the other card that is the only card you're gonna need for round 3, and on round 3 you're gonna draw one of them. If it's not the one you want, which is Joachim, then you throw it and you always draw Joachim, and you always have your win condition. You get what I mean. It's a ridiculous card. It enables your synergy with spies. Again, if you have Imperial Brigades or Imperial Forces on the board, then you just play this, they shoot, they buff. It's crazy. You get what I mean. It's a lot of power. Now the next card is for a review, and it can be played in spies as well. Some people play her in spies just because they don't actually have a lot of good proactive tempo plays. So you can play Imperial Brigade, which is 6 points, or Imperial Force, which is 6 points. It's not great for a start card, and this is a great for a start card. So she reveals the highest unit in your opponent's hand, so you always know what basically the highest unit is in the hand, so you can kind of work around, okay, so if this is their highest unit, then they don't have a spy, right? And if this hits a spy, it's crazy amount of power. But revealing a card also means that the new golem comes out of your deck. So the new golem activates whenever you do an offensive reveal, and when you do that with Cynthia, if the golem's in your deck, is gonna come out. So before you reveal the card, this card is 8 points and 1 thinning, and afterwards, if it reveals something for 10, then it's 18 power. If it reveals something for 12, like a spy, then it's 20 power in 1 point, and you get the information. So information is very powerful. You know what to play around, what you kind of know what they have in their hand, or you can make assumptions based on that. And you can play her as spies, but in reveal she's ridiculous because it just gives you more. It gives you something you can target your spotters as well. So if they don't play their spy and you have that spy revealed, then you can just copy the power with what do you call it again? The name I even said the spotters, right? There it is. You can synergize very well with the spotters, and it's a great card in reveal. I don't have to explain anymore. Now another card you want to craft if you're playing reveal is probably Albrecht. He draws you a card and draws your opponent a card, but your opponent card is revealed. Now again, gives you information. You draw a card, so this card replaces itself, kind of. It's great. It works very well in the archetype. Now, if you are looking for a lock, and in this meta you don't really need it, but sometimes you face against a lot of units, this is probably one of the best locks in the game. If you think about Radovid is a leader ability, but you don't play it for the damage. Usually, sometimes you need the damage and the extra tempo, but most of the time you play it because you need 2 units locked. Now, this is a silver card that does exactly that. I don't need to explain anymore why this is good. It locks 2 units, damages them by 1, so technically it's a 7-point play. It's not the worst card in the world, but the 2 locks are very important. If you're fighting a lot of units that boost itself, like Mahakam Marauders, or resilient units that you need to take care of, or even just a lot of monsters and you want to just, negate their consume power with the eggs, that's a very good card to do so. So let's move into Northern Realms. Now the first card I'm gonna recommend is probably not a surprise. It's Prince Stannis. You've probably seen this card everywhere. You've probably played against Northern Realms and they've probably had this card, and you can see why it's very powerful. It works very well with deploy effects. It works very well with your heavy cavalry, which needs armor to steal from. It's thinning, it's tempo, it's a loyal Dijkstra that only pulls 1 card, but you're okay with it. And it can also pull silver cards, which sometimes you want because you don't have any bronze cards in your deck. Now, Prince Stannis is amazing, and if you want to be playing Northern Realms, I recommend you craft this card. Even in a non-armor deck, you're gonna be playing at least 2 heavy cavalries, because either you can counter your opponent's armor, or you can then use Stannis. And a bit of spoiler, I'm gonna recommend you craft Shaggy. So you're gonna have Shaggy to resurrect Stannis. At that point, Stannis is 10 armor, and using a heavy cavalry on that gives you 18 powers bronze. So it's very powerful on its own, and it's very powerful in conjunction with the other Northern Realm cards. The next card I'm gonna recommend you craft is Reinforcements. Now, you heard me talk about marching orders and why it's good, And this card is basically marching orders on crack because it gives you a choice. So you can't pull your lowest unit if obviously it's a soldier, machine, officer, or a support unit. So you can't pull that unit from your deck, or you can pick it. So this card gives you the option of actually picking a card that has one of those tags and playing it from your deck. So if you have Stannis in your deck, who's an officer, then having reinforcements means you're always gonna have Stannis in your hand. Technically always, 90% of the time you're gonna have Stannis in your hand because you can pull him either with reinforcements or you can just have him. And if you have him, then this card can just pull another card. So it's ridiculous. It's very, very good. If you are playing anything that has a silver soldier, machine, officer, support, or maybe just even a bronze, sometimes you play this just to pull heavy cavalry because you need the extra points. It's an amazing card. I don't need to explain more why this is good. If you are playing any deck in Northern Realms, you're most likely gonna have this card in your deck. And it also works very well with John Natalis. So if you have John Natalis, it's a tactics card, so you can pull it with John Natalis, which pulls you another card. So it's technically 2 deck thinning in one card with John Natalis, but it works well with this. So the next card I'm gonna recommend you craft works again very well with Shani, and it also works very well just on its own because it's an 11 power card. Who made this card? Anyways, it's Trollolo. It's funny because this card used to be nowhere and now it's everywhere. Because of the 11 points you get from just playing this, it's a high tempo play on its own. It also provides you with armor when it first starts, so it's basically 15 health. What's gonna kill it? Only Esco really kills it, or effects that make this into something else, like active artifact compression. Other stuff don't kill it. Scorch maybe does, but 11 points is usually in that sweet spot of not being too high, so some spies are over the limit, and sometimes there's just even bronzes that are higher than that strength anyway. So it provides you with a lot of power when you play it, but after that every turn it gets 2 armor, so you can think of this: every turn this is on the board and the armor stays on it, my heavy cavalry is getting bigger and bigger. So every turn this is on the board, it gets bigger. If you play this with Shani, it starts off with 9 armor. Just playing heavy cavalry straight after that, it gives you a ridiculous power boost. It gives you 17 points of power. This card is ridiculous. If you are playing armor and you're not playing this card, you're probably doing it wrong, unless you think that a spy is gonna win you more games. But most of the time, Trollolo is amazing. And even if you are playing against Northern Realms and they use their heavy cavalry to take the armor of the Trollolo, it's still not a bad play because you played an 11 point silver that's now protected from Scorch and other effects that can kill it, and it's very hard to actually remove. And that's gonna do it. There's not a lot of other cards I would recommend you craft, maybe except Margarita if you need the lock, but if you need the reset and the lock, if you just need the lock, then you might as well play Cleaver. It will do you the same work if you just need the lock and you think you don't need the reset. So let's move into Scoia'tael. Now before we start off, I'm just gonna say that some of these cards I may not have because I don't actually like to play Scoia'tael that much, and I don't like to play some of the archetypes, and I'm gonna give you a card for basically each of the Scoia'tael archetypes right now that are running around, and a card you should craft for each of them. So Scoia'tael. Now I don't like Scoia'tael, but if you are playing that kind of deck, then you have a lot of spells in your deck and you usually don't have all the ones you want at the moment in your hand, and you're thinking, well, I want to increase my consistency. So a card I would recommend you craft is Nature's Gift. This gives you, it's basically like reinforcements for spells. It gives you the option to pick any silver or bronze special card in your deck and play it. Now works very well with the leader Igni because she can resurrect this and you can choose another card from your deck, and it also boosts your Dobotana Protectors, I think they're called, the cards that boost every time you play a spell. It boosts it by 2 because you resurrect one special card and you play another one, so it's 2 cards in one when you play your leader ability. and overall increases your consistency of drawing any single spell you want. So you want to have Hailstorm, you can play this, play Hailstorm. You want to have Scorch, you play this, you play Scorch, and it's basically always in your hand because you're either gonna have that card or you're gonna have Nature's Gift that you can pull. It also gives you a mini game of at any point in the game after I've played Nature's Gift, I can resurrect it and play another card. If my opponent thinks, oh, now he's used his Nature's Gift, what's the chance of him having something else? Maybe he wants to use his leader ability, and you do exactly that. So let's say you want to play Dwarfs and you're a Dwarfs fan. I don't know why you would be, but a card that synergizes very well with any Dwarf deck, and right now definitely with the Marauders, is Dennis Cranmer. Now Dennis strengthens every Dwarf, and the Marauders work that every time that something happens to them, so strengthened, boosted, damaged, or weakened, they boost themselves by 2. So playing a few on the board and then playing Dennis Cranmer means that you're gonna get a lot of points just from having them on the board, and because if they're in your hand, then they don't buff. But even if they are in your hand or in your deck or somewhere, they're already a 9-point play when you play it, and it's ridiculous. If you are playing resilient dwarfs, then all of your dwarfs are gonna be 6 power from now on, or actually 7, and the resilience is gonna be bigger and bigger. So for instance, if you're playing dwarfs, you probably want to craft Yarpen as well, but you don't never want to be playing Yarpen on its own before you've played Dennis, really, if you know that your opponent has Auser's Thunder or a way of using an Auser's Thunder. So for instance, Northern Realms can have access to that mode who has Auser's Thunder, and if you're playing against them, they don't use their Mage, then you may want to not play this. You may want to play Cranmer first, who boosts Yarpen, so now he's 8 and he doesn't die to that Thunder, and you guarantee you're gonna get at least some resiliency. Even if they Thunder it, you're getting 1 point, which means your opponent can't drive past you. So 2 cards, you get Barkley Elves from your starter deck, so you will be playing him in conjunction with Cranmer and Yarpen, most likely. Now, if you are playing movement, I would recommend the first card you craft is Sheldon Kegs. So for instance, the deck that I suggested for a budget deck for Scoia'tael had a movement effect in it. Maybe not a lot of units, but that had movement, synergy, but definitely a few, and you can use Sheldon to enable that synergy. You can use Sheldon to de-stack a row. So let's say your opponent is playing Marigold's Hailstorm deck, so he's playing every movement card in the world to move every single thing you have on the back row, and then he wants to Marigold's Hailstorm that and do ridiculous damage. Well, before he does that, you can play Sheldon, move all of your units around, and now maybe he doesn't have that perfect Hailstorm, and maybe you win. Every time this card moves something, it boosts himself by 1, so the more units you have, yes, you're gonna disrupt your synergy, but sometimes this is, most of the time, this is played in a deck that uses that disruption for something beneficial, like the Blue Mountain Commandos that buff themselves by 2 every time they're moved, or the marksmen that damaged something the time they're moved. Anyways, I don't think I need to explain even more. For a movement deck, you might also want to consider crafting Kiran, because it moves a unit and it locks it, so it's a bit better than Cleaver in the terms of that if you want that movement effect, then this is a much better card. And because it's agile, it's also another bit of extra help to prevent against weather and roll stacking and stuff. But you can just run Cleaver and do the same thing. So let's move into Skellige. I hope this video is not turning out to be too long, but I kind of just want to give my thoughts on everything, and hopefully this will be like halfway through the video by now. I really hope so. So let's move into Skellige, and the first card I'm gonna recommend you craft, and it's probably the card you're gonna be playing in every single Skellige deck anyway. If you don't have it already and you're playing Skellige, you're doing something wrong. It's Sigdrifa. So it adds a huge redundancy to your deck, so you're usually running 3 Priestess of Freya, like the deck that I suggested on my previous video is running 3 Priestess of Freya, and you are gonna usually be using 3 Priestess of Freya. But even if you're not, then this card is very powerful. If you are, it's the fourth resurrect in your deck, so you have a lot of ways of pulling something from your graveyard. Sometimes you can even just resurrect the super powerful silver unit. Sometimes you can resurrect Queensguard with this. Sometimes you can resurrect Drake Bondu to buff your Queensguard more or buff any other card in your graveyard. It just works very well with your silver deploy abilities. You can use Gramist, for instance, to clear skies, and then your opponent plays his second gold weather and he's saying, haha, what are you gonna do now? Well, I'm gonna rest my Gramist and clear skies again. Haha, what are you gonna do now? So it's a very powerful card in itself, and it's huge. It's always been in the core of Skellige. I don't think I need to say even more than that. So if you're playing self-wounding, I would recommend you craft Johnny or Jenge or or Genji, however you want to call him. So anytime you play this card, well, when you play this card, sorry, you deal 2 damage to 2 different allies, and sorry, you deal 1 damage to 2 different allies, and you also strengthen self by 2, which means that when this card goes in the graveyard, you can then resurrect it. And when you resurrect it, again, strengthens himself by even more, and it enables your self-wound strategies. So if you are playing greatswords, for instance, and they found a way to kill your ships, this is a good way of enabling your greatswords to then buff again. And this card also strengthens, so again, like I said, you can resurrect it, and it's gonna give you a lot of power. If you're playing Queensguard, I don't know why you would, but if you are, then Drake Bondu is your guy. He just sings to the Queensguards and gives them power. So anytime you play Queensguard, they're just, 6 points more powerful. Like I said before, you can resurrect it with Sigdrifa, again making it even more powerful. And if you are playing this card, then this card is probably something you kind of want to be looking at, because in conjunction with Olgierd, that's 2 cards that resurrect every time that they come back, every time they die. So this card is a bit worse than Olgierd, because your opponent can technically just kill this if he kills it enough times. So it doesn't wait until the next turn before it resurrects. So when it dies, it goes down to 4, goes on the board, your opponent kills it, goes down to 2, goes down to 1. And that's 4 resurrects. But in doing so, if you're playing Ceres, which is a gold card that when you res 4 times, when something resurrects from your graveyard 4 times, she comes out of your graveyard, then Morgwarks is something you want to be looking at. I don't think there's anything else you kind of need from Skellige, so let's move into the gold section. So before I start any of the gold cards in the neutral section, I want to give a shout out to Drought and Ragnarok. You've probably seen one of those cards if you've played in the last 2 weeks. They've been everywhere, and that's why mages are so good right now, because they clear gold weather, and it's a silver card that counters a gold card. And they're just great right now, but I don't think that they are cards you should be looking to craft. Yes, they can technically fit in every deck. Most decks want to be playing at least 1 long round, so crafting one of them is probably not horrible. If you're playing Axemen, then you definitely want them. If you're playing movement, you again definitely want them, but they're not amazing in every single deck. And I think in neutral section you kind of want to be looking at something that is, viable across the board. So you don't want to be restricting your slots, let's say, with the neutral pool. You want to be putting something that can work well in almost any situation. So a card I've talked about in the previous video, for instance, is Esco. If you want to hear me blah about this for a bit, then go check that out. But short story is, kills any silver or bronze that's not boosted, kills stuff like Trollolo, even through the armor. It doesn't matter how much armor they have, if they're not boosted, they die. And it disrupts a lot of strategies for Northern Realms. For instance, Henselt wants to play, 1 card, then pull the rest from their deck. So usually they mulligan to have only 1 of them. They play that card, you kill it with Esco, you disrupted their strategy, you're most likely gonna win. Or at least, hurt them in that first round. And Igni is the second card I would probably recommend you craft. Now, Igni is falling out of favor a bit, but it's still a very good card. People just don't want to be committing to playing Esco and Igni because that's a lot of control. But if you want to be playing that more control-y type of gameplay, then that's a card I would recommend you craft. Now, I want to give you a card that's probably more out there in terms of what you want to consider crafting, but if you're playing like temple decks and decks that like to get buffed, decks that like to stack a row, decks, or just wanna, or you're playing against a lot of decks that do that kind of strategy, then Zoltan Animal Trainer is actually pretty good. Now, in itself, it's a, what is it? It's a 11-point play. So if you just have this card on the board and you're playing it in round 3 and you only have this card, and your opponent has 1 play, it's 11-point gold, and it's not horrible. But most of the times you're gonna be using this next to 4 units. So you're gonna be using one of his parrots. So you're gonna be using next to 4 units, and it's either gonna boost them by 8 power, so boost every unit by 2, or damage them by 2. So if your opponent's stacking a row but he has like small units that he thinks you think he wants to buff, or like play Commander's Forlorn, or just use something like where are you? Tris Butterfly to boost them up, then you can play this and damage them and then they die, or it just gives you power because you have lower amount of units on your side, so you think the buff's not gonna do a lot, but the damage part it's actually gonna do a lot. This card is good because it's, again, gives you a lot of power. So it's a card I would recommend you craft, but the ones that I would definitely recommend you craft are Esco and Igni, if you want to be looking into playing that more control type, or maybe just stick to just having Esco. There's not a lot of gold neutrals other than the Weather and Esco that I would recommend you craft. So let's move on to monsters. Now, a card I want to briefly mention in monsters, and that's only if you're playing Consume archetype, then Karen is probably something you want to look at. It does a lot of work in terms of what your Consume archetype wants to do. So if you're playing Neckers, then this boosts them and you can eat something from your opponent that they may want to use, or they just gain advantage from having that on the board. Usually kills something in the first round, so again your Neckers in the second round and the third round are quite big. But the card I would recommend you craft for any deck, even Consume, is Woodland Spirit. So he does a lot of stuff right now, and in itself it looks like 8 points in a fog, and that's not amazing, but you have to consider all the stuff that happens from that. So you apply a fog, which means you pull out a fog from your deck or your graveyard, so that's another 4 power. And also he's a goat, so if you have Roach in your deck, he pulls out a Roach. The wolves that he spawns are beasts, so if you have a Harpy in your deck, then that's gonna come out as well, because also Roach is a beast, so that's also gonna help your Harpy's countdown. And applies a fog, the Harpy deals 1 damage, you get so much power out of this card, and so much stuff are happening that it's just a crazy temple play, and your opponent firstly has to react to your huge temple play, but also has to clear the fog if he doesn't want to take more damage from it. And in itself, it's okay card. In conjunction with everything else that happens around this card, it's an insane card. If you want to be playing monsters, Woodland Spirit is the first card you should be looking to craft. Now the second card you should be looking to craft if you're playing monsters is Gills. So this increases your consistency of drawing every single gold card. So we've talked about reinforcements and why that's good. We talked about Nature's Gift, why that's good. This is a bit more RNG in terms of if you have 3 more golds in your deck, so that's your only gold, you don't know which one you're getting, but then you can use the silver card that draws as well. So you can decide when you get the 2 cards presented to you, which card do I want to play now, and which card do I want to draw next. So if you play this in turn 1, then you're gonna guarantee that the silver or gold you don't choose is gonna be on top of your deck. So let's say I have the choice of playing my Spy and Woodland Spirit. Sometimes I want to play my spy because I want to get the card advantage. Sometimes I want to play my Woodland Spirit because I know I'm gonna take this round and then next turn I can play the spy because I'm definitely gonna draw it. And if you only have one gold in your deck, then this draws you always draws you that gold, or if you only have one silver, this always draws you that one silver. So it guarantees consistency. It's a bit RNG, but it's been played in almost every single monsters deck since the beginning of time for a reason. It used to be disloyal, so that tells you a lot. So let's move into Nilfgaard. I don't think there's anything more that I need to tell you about this this faction. Now, if you are playing Wild Hunt, I guess you may want to craft Current here. Now he's not as powerful as he used to be. He used to be able to move 3 units, now he moves a unit, but applying another Frost means you have more Frost consistency and you just have more Frost, which synergizes well with your other stuff. And he's a Wild Hunt unit, so your ships boosted, but Wild Hunt is not great right now, and I had this card, I milled it when it got nerfed, and I've not played Wild Hunt ever since, so I think that should tell you a bit about it. Let's move into Nilfgaard. So I briefly mentioned this on my silver section, but you can play 2 playstyles with Nilfgaard, and it's quite distinct into what golds fit into what archetype, I think. So you have golds for the spy archetype and you also have golds for the reveal archetype, and I'm gonna give you 2 golds for each of them. If you want to be playing reveal, then you should probably look into crafting the ladder, but the first ones are probably the more viable ones, and those are the spy ones. And even actually, if you are playing right, it's weird, right? But if you are playing reveal, you may want to consider crafting one of the spy cards, but just because of how good he is. So that's the first card I'm gonna recommend you craft, and that's Rainfarn. Rainfarn is crazy good. He guarantees you draw any silver or bronze disloyal unit from your deck. So we talked about why Joachim is good. This is the card that makes him ridiculous. If you play this card, it negates the power that your opponent gets from Joachim, but he still boosts your next loyal unit by 10. Sometimes you then kill Joachim with the card you draw, sometimes the card is just a ridiculous power swing. So this negates Joachim's effect. You probably get synergy out of spawning Joachim, well, playing Joachim, because you have units that buff like Imperial Brigades, or you have units that shoot like in Imperial Forcers. So you get more synergy than what he just gives you, and he's already pretty powerful. This makes him insane. Now if you have Joachim in hand, this can serve as pulling out your spy. So this, you don't have Counterella in hand, you want to get the card advantage, you play this. You basically play the spy for 6 power because this is 5 and 11 minus 5 is 6. And there's another thing you can do, you can just spawn an emissary because you just want to go through your deck. You have a card that you know you're gonna draw with the emissary, or you didn't draw any emissaries and you're like, well, I want to cycle through my deck because I need to get better options in round 2. You can play this card in called round 1 and draw an emissary, or again, if you just have all the silver spice in your hand but you want to play a gold card instead of a silver card, then you can play this. So overall, a great card. Recommend you craft this. It's been a staple in spice ever since spice were a thing, and it used to be even more powerful. So the next card I'm gonna recommend you craft, and that's kind of like your finisher in conjunction with Infiltrator. This card is ridiculous. You can put the spying attack on anything that your opponent plays and then use Mano to kill it, or you can just play Counterella and then kill it with Mano. So you've drawn a card from the Counterella and then you do 11 damage with one card that already does have 8 power in itself. So you get what I mean, it's 19 power in one play. If you just kill Counterella, if you put the spying tag on something that's 20 power, this again kills it, so it's 28 power. It's a ridiculous card. It's a great finisher, and you usually want to be keeping this for round 3, or you want to play it in round 1 to seal it and then play Joachim in round 3 to then as your secondary win condition. So this can work as a first or a secondary win condition, and that's why it's very good, and you can see it in every spy deck. I'm pretty sure if you have this card, you play it. So moving on to Reveal. So Reveal is a funky one because you always want to have this card. I don't play Reveal, so you can see why I don't have it. But if you do, then Vatier is amazing. You reveal 2 cards in your hand, which can be good because you can reveal those soldiers that play themselves when they're boost, or you can reveal fire scorpions and shoot something, or you can just reveal Geralt and then use your spotters to get the Geralt, and then you reveal a random card in your opponent's hand. So you can choose to reveal just 1 card in your hand, and then you're gonna see one from theirs. Or usually you play this when you revealed most of their hand, so you know it guarantees to reveal the last 2. You don't want to kind of have that RNG factor. But even so, it's 4 reveals that give you a lot of information about the game, and your defensive reveals usually have synergy. The next card you want to craft is Leo Boneheart. So I used to have this card, and when it got nerfed I scrapped it, but it's still very powerful. If you're playing Reveal, just wasn't, that's why I did it. If you reveal something like Geralt, like I just mentioned, that you usually play in your spy deck because of just the raw power it has, or you can just reveal Counterella. It's an 11 or a 13 point damage that then works well with your other stuff, because if your opponent knows you have a spy, they can't really do much about it. You're just gonna play it next turn. Or if you have Geralt, they're gonna be like, well, why does he have Geralt? And then you drop a spotter, and then you're like, haha, this is my spotter, he's huge. Anyways, it synergizes very well if you want to kill something that's big and you just wants to die. So let's say your opponent just took the armor of the Trollo, you play this on a Counterella, you kill the Trollo, no more armor for you. It's a good card, but again, Reveal's not at the highest potential it's ever been. There's more powerful decks out there, so maybe you like to play that deck though, so I'm giving you options. Let's move into Northern Realms, and I think you're probably gonna guess most of these cards just before me even speaking, but let's go into it. So I kind of hinted on this a little bit before, and the first card I want to recommend you craft is Shani. I actually got the premium out of my starter pack, so I'm really happy about it. But Shani is crazy. Now, I should have probably said this before, but the gold cards have become powerful deploy abilities. Because they can be targeted, you don't want to be playing something like Bloody Baron, but something like Shani, which has a powerful deploy effect, you want to be playing. So Shani works very well with Prince Tennis. Shani works very well with any card that has a huge effect that you want to resurrect. Shani works very well with cards such as Trollo that have a lot of armor. Shani works well with every single card in Northern Realms. You should probably craft that card. I don't think I need to explain anymore. Now the next card you want to craft after that is, when you have that resurrect ability, is then have that power ability. So you have that huge power swing that you just play 1 card and you get a lot of power. Now Shani can actually be more power than Dijkstra, because if you rest Prince Tennis and Prince Tennis pulls a Dunbana Heavy Cavalry from your deck, then that's 23 points in 1 card. Wait, is it 23? 8, 18, 26. It's 26 points in 1 card. It's ridiculous. It's 1 card combo technically, and if you do that perfect scenario, which you can definitely do, then it's probably more powerful than Dijkstra. But if you don't, then Dijkstra is probably gonna be your more powerful play. Now usually you want to be using this when you can guarantee what cards you're gonna be getting, so as like a literal finisher. So you've thinned your entire deck using your thinning strategy, and then you have 2 cards in your deck, and you know they are Marigold's Hailstorm and a Spy. So it's not a perfect scenario because the Spy is not really gonna draw anything, but let's say that's your scenario. So you always know that you're gonna draw those 2 cards. So you can play, hopefully you draw the Spy first, you play the Spy, you draw the Marigolds of the Spy, and then you kill you put it on a roll and you do a lot of damage. Or you have 2 heavy cavalries in your deck and those are your last cards, you play this, it's a huge play. But even if you don't, even if you just have good solid cards and you have a higher percentage chance of drawing something that's good in your deck, then you just drop this. It's a huge power play. And again, you can drop this where you're gonna Hailstorm, so technically it's a 1-point disloyal unit that draws you 2 cards, and you play them. It's pretty good. I don't think I need to explain why this is good. And again, if you play Stennis, then Stennis is gonna provide you with more thinning, and playing Shani means that Stennis can provide you with 1 more extra thinning, and then playing this provides you with 4. That's crazy amount of thinning just from 2 cards, and again, powerful deploy effect. Now the next card is, I'm kind of split in this one because I have the premium disc, so I kind of want to show it, but I'm not gonna say this. I'm not gonna say Kira Metz because she's good, but she's not amazing. I think John Natalis is way better. So it lets you filter through your deck. So if you have, for instance, marching orders, or you have reinforcements, or you have commander's horn, or you have decoy, or you have any other tactics card you want to play from your deck, then this card can fetch it. So you have 4 units in a row, you play this, you play Commander's Horn from your deck, it provides you with 1 deck thinning and 26 points in 1 gold card. It's a ridiculously powerful effect. You can use it again for reinforcements to pull something, they then pull something, they then pull something, and make it like that chain of thinning, which is again ridiculous for a gold card. And I definitely think this card is gonna get changed, but Shani might get changed before that, and I'm kind of sad because, well, you know, I have the premium. I want to be playing this card. But this is my Notre Dame stake. I think these cards, if you craft Shani and Dijkstra, it's going to increase your win rate tremendously. If you then craft either Kira Metz or John Natalis, maybe you don't want to play tactics cards, so in that case I would probably recommend you craft Kira Metz. I have played around with her. It works very well in an armor deck. It works very well in almost every single deck. She has the downside of spawning Epidemic, which can kind of kill her as well if she's the lowest unit, but you know, she's an okay card. You can definitely play it. But if you don't have some of these and you're just running Philippa, again, she's a great card by itself. It's just the prevalence of armor kind of negates her effect a little bit, and units are, you know, there's silvers that do more than this card. There are bronzes that do more than this card, so I would recommend you grab the other ones that I suggested. Let's move into Scoia'tael. So I'm not a big Scoia'tael player, but I have a few cards that I think you should definitely craft if you're playing it. And the first one is gonna be Zoltan Chivay, because Hailstorm. And you've heard this argument a lot, but you've also heard the argument of powerful deploy abilities. Now this card works very well with movement archetypes, but it just works very well in almost any deck, because you're gonna be playing Hailstorm in almost every deck, so this card is good in almost every deck. It's very, very powerful. I don't think I need to explain more why this is good. I think it's a card I've played around with, and I can definitely tell from personal experience and from playing against it, it's a ridiculous power swing. Now the next card I'm gonna recommend you craft if you play, this is probably fine for every single deck, so if you're just starting out Scoia'tael, you craft Zoltan first just because, again, works in every single deck, and then afterwards you're thinking, well, I want to craft another card, but most of these cards don't look like they fit in any deck that I want to play. I want to experiment with a few decks. Then something that's going to give you a lot of consistency is Saskia. So you choose up to 2 cards from your hand that you want to put back in your deck. So maybe you bricked your opening hand and you're thinking, well, I have a spy that I'm not going to use, and I have this Blue Mountain Commando, but I already have another one in my hand, so I have 2. So I'm gonna mulligan those 2 cards and choose any 2 bronze cards. So the effect of choosing any 2 bronze cards increases your consistency tremendously. You almost all the time gonna have your bronze power plays or your bronze thinning plays in your opening hand, and again fixes mulligans and increases your consistency. It's a 10 power play on its own, so it's not bad just on its own. And I would recommend you craft this card if you're looking for that glue to a deck that can always increase your consistency. Now, I've not actually played spell Scoia'tael, but I know that Itlin is amazing for it because, again, casts 2 spells, kind of like a leader ability, but a bit better probably. It's a card you want to be looking to craft, and the second card you want to look to craft is probably a Glaze, because she can resurrect a silver or a bronze card from your opponent's graveyard. Now this, again, I'm gonna beat on a dead horse, but this can take their Marigold's Hailstorm. Then you can play the Marigold's Hailstorm from your hand that you have. So that's 2 Marigold's Hailstorms. And then you can play Igni to resurrect another Marigold's Hailstorm. So you have 3 Marigold's Hailstorms. So you can see why spell Scoia'tael is crazy, right? It has access to do that. And it's because of a Glaze and also Igni. Not Igni. Igni? Hitling. So I don't play Scoia'tael that much, but those are cards you can ask anyone and they'll tell you, yeah, those are the cards you want to be looking to craft. Maybe the one that's a bit controversial is Saskia, but again, like I said, she's more of a glue rather than a must craft. So let's move into Skellige. Now Skellige is not very good right now, but there are still a few cards that are standalone very good, and I'm gonna give you one, but the other ones are gonna be more geared towards a certain deck archetype, because Skellige has a lot of archetypes right now. If you pick one of them, then I'm gonna give you a card to play in each one. So the one that's actually quite, you know, it's a card you can play in any single archetype is Coral. That's why I'm gonna recommend you craft her first. Now she can turn any bronze or silver unit to a jade figure, and she on herself is 5 power. So 5 power, giving 2 to your opponent, but you can say, you know, that's a 3 power play, why would I want to do that? Well, they may have something that has 30 power, and then at that point you're actually, you know, gaining a lot of power from this play rather than just 3. And it negates some effect, so for instance you can use that on a Trollolo and then they just don't have the armor. It's on itself, sorry, in itself, it's a great card you can play in every single deck, and that's why I would recommend you craft her first. Now the next card I'm going to recommend you craft is if you are playing this card or if you are playing Queen's Guard. So this card deck is the one I'm referring to, is the one with Morgvark and Olgierd. So they resurrect every time they go to the graveyard, and you play the Raiders that they're 4 strength, and when they go to the graveyard, when they're discarded, they resurrect by themselves. And you're also playing Priestess of Reyes, and you're also playing Sigdrifa. So you have a lot of resurrects to actually pull this off, but that's Ceres. So so you want to discard this card from your deck. So usually use King Bran to discard her, and then start discarding other cards that resurrect themselves. You want to play Ceres in a deck like that because when she's in the graveyard, you can buff her up with cards like Blackhand or with Drakebone Dew. And whenever you ask for things, she just comes out of the graveyard and says, haha, here I am, what are you gonna do? And then if you're playing her, if you manage to activate her in round 1, you can then, again, if you have 4 reses in round 2, you can resurrect her again, and in round 3 you can resurrect her again. And because Morgvark and Olgierd resurrect when they go to the graveyard, in round 2 her counter is on 2. If you want to be playing self-wounding, you want to be playing Wild Boar of the Sea. And Wild Boar of the Sea is an amazing card because in itself it's just 8 power with 5 armor though, which means it's not easily removable. Now it is easily lockable, and like I said, you want to be playing powerful deploy abilities, which is what Koro is. And yes, Ceres not a deploy, but she has a different effect. So Wild Boar of the Sea is a passive effect, but it's a very good one because you want to damage stuff and you want to strengthen stuff. You can see why it's powerful, because in a self-wounding archetype you want to self-wound, and it has the armor to protect it from something killing it, like an assassin, because assassins can actually kill gold cards. 2 assassins can kill that card, but that's them using 2 assassins, so, and you're usually screwed against spies anyway. But that's a card I would recommend you craft. Again, you're running into the problem that if people are running locks, then this card is not that good, but you probably shouldn't be playing self-wounding anyway. Now, if you want to be playing Axemen, and I would say this card is a 3rd on your list, so you want to craft the other 2 Gold Weathers first, and this is the 3rd Gold Weather. It's kind of like a Gold Weather. Now, bear with me, it spawns a silver weather. Sorry, applies a silver weather on a roll. It works very well with Axemen because if they have 3 units, that's 3 times it does the damage. So, you know, your Axemen buffs themselves by 3. But on itself, it's 3 power. If you play this in the last round, it triggers its veteran ability twice. So it's 5 power with a Skellige Storm. If they don't clear the Skellige Storm, it's a lot of power. If they do, then you've got, you know, 9 power. No, you've got 8 power out of it. And also, wait, is it 8 or 9? No, she's 5 plus 4. So she's 9, okay? So you get 9 power, and you also get your Axemen buffed up if they clear the weather. It's a very good card for Axemen, but again, you want to craft those gold weathers if you want to be playing Axemen. It's a very expensive deck. I would probably not recommend you play it. It has a lot of counters right now. It's not the best in the game. I would recommend you play other factions. So that'll do it. I hope you found this video helpful. I put a lot of effort into it and I hope it paid out. If it did or it didn't, please consider leaving a comment down below to tell me how I did. If it was helpful in any way, then please consider sharing and liking this video. And if you feel generous, then maybe subscribing as well. It's gonna help me tremendously, you have no idea. And it also boosts my morale and keeps me doing this. If you wanna see the decks that I'm gonna build with my previous iterations with the cards that I've suggested, then check out the description. And until next time, thanks for watching.